much of our job is to make sure that it doesn't kill all of us as it goes on the way to the cemetery. In terms of looking forward and what we need to do, I'm going to address that in encapsulated fashion as well. Number one, of course, we need a mass movement. But we have been without a movement for so long that people do not even have a memory of what it was to have a movement, to have people arguing so intensely that sometimes it came to gunfire about what direction black people were going to take. Now, of course, we're not advocating that black folks turn their guns on each other, but the intensity of the argument that many of us are old enough to have experienced was a mark of a mature and healthy black polity. The kind of non-dialogue that we see going on now, it seems to be a repeat of catchphrases and talking points that folks get from CNN and MSNBC. That is no political dialogue whatsoever, and it shows a very unhealthy society. A couple of years back, I had a debate with Michael Eric Dyson on Democracy Now! And Dyson kept on saying something strange. He said, you got to be in the game. You got to be in the game. And it became very clear that he and other black misleadership class members think that this is a game in a real sense. They look at struggle not as something that masses of people join in order to effectuate change for the betterment of the entire group. They look at struggle as something that is individual. It is maneuvering by them and their buddies and whoever they can get into some kind of conspiracy for mobility with. Maneuvering for position, maneuvering for advantage. And in that kind of game, as they see it, we are all just pawns. And that explains their political behavior. So the number two thing that we must do, and I do think this leads to that, is to break with the Democratic Party. Because this is the vehicle in which they play those games. And that game, like a game of Monopoly, it's dominated by the bank. And in this case, in the Democratic Party, literally by the banks. This is nothing new, the Democratic Party's relationship to finance capital. For a very long time, the Wall Street has been to the Democratic Party what big energy, Texaco and Exxon, have been to the Republican Party. And that intimate relationship has done nothing but intensify in recent years, and especially under Obama, who is the perfect servant of Wall Street. Save their butt. Remember that George Bush's bailout failed on the Monday when it came up for a vote in October. It took the shining knight candidate, Barack Obama, to fly in, to suspend his campaign and fly in and talk to Democrats, and by Friday that vote was reversed. Barack Obama saved the banks. They know it, and he knows it, and he will be rewarded in his after-presidential life expensively for it. The third point, I think, is that we have to organize against the banks, that as the main enemy. And this is not part of some political game. I don't think it is something that's done for strategic reasons solely, but because the banks are the enemy. The enemy of the world is concentrated finance capital. Concentrated finance capital now totally dominates manufacturing capital. When I was a kid, people used to say, what's good for General Motors, this giant manufacturing company, is good for the country. It wasn't true then, but it had validity in the sense that General Motors, big manufacturing, was in the catbird seat in terms of political influence, but also in terms of the United States being the greatest industrial power in the world at that time. Now all of the manufacturing industries are totally subordinate, are owned by, are just parcels to be bought and sold by big capital. So capital is the enemy, but strategically speaking, I think it is the best approach in terms of building a mass movement that is multiracial as well, to target the banks, because everybody hates the banks. Everybody hates the banks. And I firmly believe that if the Occupy Wall Street movement had articulated a position of decapitation of the banks, rather than just sloganizing and getting people to feel badly about the banks. People didn't really need to be coaxed and urged to feel badly about the banks. They want to hear how we can get rid of them. And that's the way I believe towards a movement. But the discussion, the theme of the evening was the Black misleadership class. And I got
Welcome, comrades and friends. Welcome back to Anti-Imperialist America. This is Anti-Imperialist American. I believe we're on number 66. This is Rest in Power. Comrade Glen Ford, the Black Agenda Report. I'm coming to you streaming from my humble home here in rural North Carolina. I'm going to do a presentation, and then I'm going to go over some comments. We're going to call it a night, and it is with great sadness that today I learned the passing of Glen Ford. And Glen Ford was a huge influence on my political understanding. Going back around when I first became revolutionary in the Obama era. Maybe I can start off. Please share this out. Please share this out. And thank you, Comrade Gordon Fiala, for joining us. I think I might have threw everybody off in the beginning when I started off with with another video that wasn't mine, but I thought that particular clip was pretty good. And yes, this is on YouTube as well, if people want to get there on YouTube as well. So I'll get right into it. It's hard to figure out what exactly is going on, the truth in the world today. They say that the ruling class controls ideology. And the age of information, we know exactly. We can, with investigative understanding and foresight, and through historical understanding, we can put together the pieces and find out exactly what's going on. And Comrade Glen Ford of the Black Agenda Report and the team that he assembled around him did exactly that. Masses of people support politicians who are against their interests. They have convinced mostly the rural population to support the Democrats, the urban population. Switch that. They've convinced the rural population to support the Republicans, and they have convinced the urban population to support the Democrats. Both the Democrats and Republicans work for the imperialist duopoly. The imperialist duopoly is the monopoly capitalist duopoly. monopoly capitalism, imperialism is a global political economic system where a group of banking cartels finance capital, control, manipulate the entire political economic system. Every major institution is either reacting to or a pawn of this group of banking cartels. That's the nature of monopoly capitalism. And everything you watch on Hollywood produced television, the imperialist had something to do with it. MSN, all the mainstream media outlets, all of the social programs we used or organized in a way that promotes the narratives that are beneficial to the banking imperialists. All of it. That's it. And how do we see through that noise? How do we understand it? When their narrative, they spend billions of dollars, perfecting their propaganda and distributing in various ways and packages so it will influence various groups and the way that they want it to be so they continue running their society, their imperialist society that predicates on national and class oppression. And how are we supposed to understand what's going on? I think one of the two biggest things they have done in their political drama to distort, manipulate people into supporting their system were the last two presidents, Obama and then Trump. Obama put the left to sleep. Forces that were historically progressive, forces that were historically anti-war, including the Afro-American community, were put behind and manipulated and supporting Obama, who was a black face on the white supremacist imperialist system. There's no doubt about it. Now we've gone through another president, but in the time of 2008, this was very confusing. And Comrade Glen Ford understood the Obama deception before he even ran in the election. Comrade Glen Ford, along with Bruce Dixon and the very formation of Black Agenda Report, Margaret Kimberly, and others knew that Obama was on the payroll. As soon as he took down, I think he ran in 2003 or 2003 for the 2004 for the Senate. And Glen Ford recognized that Obama had taken off his anti-war pledge. And then Glen Ford recognized that he was being financed by the more conservative and right-wing elements of the Democratic Party. And he didn't call him out. And he should have. And I think he regrets it himself, not calling him out sooner. But then when he ran again and when he ran for president in 2008, the Black Agenda Report was one of the sole voices of reason in a sea of manipulated liberalism, manipulated imperialism. I remember seeing Bobby Seale, one of the co-founders of the Black Panther Party. I saw him speak at my college. I went to a private Quaker college for about 2 years. Still paying the debt off on it. Never graduated, but we were driving trucks. But I saw Bobby Seale talk in person right around 2008, I think it was 2008, right before the election. And when asked about Obama, Bobby Seale had positive views of Obama. One of the most revolutionary forces in U.S. history, a communist, had a positive view of a force that became the commander-in-chief of the most exploitative white supremacist empire in human history. oppressive, violent, and destructive empire, which is the United States. The global economic system is imperialism led by U.S. imperialism. And the Obama deception deceived even great leaders like Bobby Seale of the Black Panther Party. One of those voices that was not deceived was Glen Ford of the Black Agenda Report. I was a freshman in college, and this was my first time being able to vote. And with all the pressure that, we finally have the first black president and things are going to be better. I believed the hype. I believed the propaganda. I told members of my family to vote for Obama. And I voted for Obama. But I was being influenced by forces that had great respect for Glen Ford. And I was told about the heroic figure in 2008 of Cynthia McKinney. Cynthia McKinney was a powerful civil rights, black power of the people, populist voice from the Afro-American community, new African community. And she was running on the Green Party against Barack Obama. And the day after the election, I immediately realized the mistake I had made by voting for Barack Obama, and I never did it again. I never once voted for, in the federal presidential election, for a Democrat after the mistake of voting Obama. Because in 2009, almost as soon as getting in the power, he did what Bush could not do. Bush tried to bail out the banks, and he was unpopular and couldn't get the support. Immediately, Obama comes into power and gives the banks $1 trillion. Gives the banks $1 trillion. The banks paid it back, but that $1 trillion from us. Rich barely pay any taxes. Corporations barely pay taxes. It is we, the working people, that pay taxes. And the U.S. government, with the use of their new pawn and their new tool, blackface on white supremacist monopoly capitalism, was able to give the banks $1 trillion in the first economic crisis in my lifetime. And it was in that moments that I knew that Barack Obama had deceived the people, and the deception continued. In 2011, with research and understanding and cutting through the political bullshit, the drama, Black Agenda Report, Black nationalists, real communists, real anti-imperialists, saw through the media manipulation to convince people the lies to destroy the country of Libya. Libya, the most prosperous nation in Africa, was destroyed and led by an assault led by the United States. And I later learned, with my work with Center for Political Innovation and others, Center for Political Innovation republished Gaddafi's Green Book. It is my firm understanding that Gaddafi was a socialist. Gaddafi irrigated the desert. Gaddafi lifted the conditions of the people in Africa. Black African people were lifted. Their conditions were lifted. And that is the goal of all communists. The goal of all communists, scientific socialists, is to improve the conditions of the people. If you can improve the conditions of the people, you are one step closer to more freedom, more rights, socialism, and eventually communism. To get to communism, a classless, stateless society, you need an overproduction of abundance. So, what is holding back socialism is absolute poverty. And Gaddafi was doing that, was raising the conditions of the people against the wishes of the main force holding back history, imperialism led by US imperialism. And the media machine, with their tweaking of putting imperialist wars as some kind of positive revolution. They don't come out and say, "Oh, we got to crush them." Now the Brzezinski camp of the imperialists will make propaganda in a way that will put a left-wing spin on right-wing imperialist war. And back, they call it overthrowing a dictator. Well, they were backing terrorists who wanted the monarch. It was a color revolution. This strategy going back to the former Soviet republics. And they destroyed the country of Libya. Glen Ford and the Black Agenda Report has stood out against this. And the black people at the Black Agenda Report have been on the money on every single color revolution, on every single lies about the anti-imperialist war, against the black misleadership that has been bought out by the Democratic Party and others. That is how oppressed we are as workers and people. People of the oppressed nations are not even allowed to have their own leadership, because what passes for their leaderships are manipulated and bought off and controlled in a way that supports the imperialists. And it's the same with working class history and oppressed history and so-called working class leadership and so-called working class history is manipulated and distorted in a way that supports our main enemy, the banking class. Like, you don't hear about John Brown as a good figure in school. You don't hear about here in North Carolina, the fusion parties of poor white populists uniting with freed new African Afro-American Republicans, and kicking out the Dixiecrat slave owners, and then having a coup against them, and then pitched battles all throughout the South. You don't hear about the revolutionary history of the oppressed nations, you don't hear about the real story of Partido Raza Unida that came into power in Texas in the 70s as an independent party, and there was a coup d'etat committed against them. You don't hear about the true revolutionary history. You don't hear about the real oppression that has happened to Chicano people in the Southwest, how the Rangers were there to maintain Anglo control over the Southwest and subjugate. And the prison system is simply a tool to maintain class and national oppression. You don't hear about the scientific nature of our society. They've manipulated our leadership. They've manipulated of our understanding. We want to get to the root. We want to be radical and get to the truth and form a new system. We have to do what Comrade Glen Ford and others have continued to do. Just like the comrade Ernesto Ayala, who's also a big influence on me, who is a product of the revolutionary Chicano movement and leader of Partido Raza Unida, and recent years, Telly Jaguar, who has been calling out the sheepdogs on their grassroots revolutionary populist page. And what I'm trying to do here with my page, with Anti-Imperialist America and with Working Class Revolt, what I'm trying to do is get the understanding of anti-imperialism, scientific socialism, cut through the bullshit. So the first great deception was the Obama deception. And the next great deception was the Trump deception. And people that I thought were comrades and people I thought were revolutionaries came out to support Biden. They believed the lie that somehow Trump was a fascist or somehow Trump represented something worse than the Democrats. It was a complete oblivious to the danger and the deception that Obama was, and how disgusting Obama was, and how the Democratic Party is the party that is closer to finance capital. Finance capital, which eventually will implement social fascism because it is the more powerful force. I think in the United States, the history of fascism has largely come from the manufacturing class. But if you looked in that earlier video, manufacturing class is so weak that it could never take power as the banking class. And if we look in Germany, when fascism did take power, it ultimately was the hyper ruling class, the real portion of the ruling class that rules, which is finance capital. George Dimitrov would say that fascism is the tyrannical repressive rule of finance capital itself. And the current conditions do not necessitate a fascist state for the finance capitalists to remain in power, because we don't have a movement. We don't have a mass movement. Their power is not threatened. And we can see from the beginning that Hillary Clinton backed and supported Donald Trump to rise in the primary process. I mean, did she think she could easily beat him? We don't know. But we do have evidence that Hillary Clinton pushed Hillary Clinton and the financial capital controlled media pushed Donald Trump to the forefront in the primary. I mean, maybe they didn't know they were dealing, or maybe they knew exactly what they were doing. And even if they didn't think he was going to elect it, once they saw that he was elected, they went in overtime to use him as controlled opposition to convince working class and oppressed people to back the Democratic Party. And forces I respected, forces that I looked up to and learned from, that taught me about Black Agenda Report and Glen Ford, fell for the controlled opposition illusion. I interviewed, I'm not going to say his name, I interviewed a auto worker, revolutionary auto worker on here. You can look back through my videos and see who that was. And he fell for the controlled opposition tactic of Trump, not understanding the material base, which portion of the class is in true power right now, and who the real enemy is, and who the real danger is, which is the banking class. The monopoly banking class is the real enemy, is Glen Ford stated. So we've been through two severe media manipulations, political drama, to convince even the most revolutionary of the working class oppressed people to pick a side in their imperialist duopoly, when there was no reason to support Obama, and there was no reason to support Biden, regardless of what stupid controlled opposition that they put up. And forces like a Jamu Baraka spelled it and continued to say the Democratic Party is the more effective evil. I think in memory of Glen Ford, we continue to use that phrase. Whenever you refer to the Democratic Party, refer to them as the more effective evil. Whenever you refer to a presidency of Obama or Biden. It is the Obama-Biden regime. It is the Biden-Harris regime, just like it was Trump, um, a Trump-Pence regime. This is not a democratic force. The United States government does not work for oppressed and working people. It works for the monopoly capitalist. Their media works for the monopoly capitalist. We have not had a movement, a mass movement that have any dealings with it ever since they destroyed the Communist Party. They destroyed the Communist Party in the 1950s. It was the mass Communist Party that made Roosevelt in the 1930s and 40s implement what little labor laws and unemployment benefits and benefits we have this day. It was the mass Communist Party that pushed and got those into control. And with the power that they were able to get with the globalization era or the capitalist growth through destruction era that started in the 1970s, I think the highest buying power for U.S. workers in the most social democratic time period, U.S. workers, was up to 1968. And then in the 70s with economic crises, first under the Carter regime. People say the Carter regime was a peace regime. It was not. Carter set the motions and flow for the wars that came in Afghanistan and other places later on. And then you had the brutal suppression of the union movement under Reagan. And it was all made possible through the changing material conditions, which was the computer revolution, beginning of the computer revolution. The advent of global shipping systems and automation, and the ability for the monopoly capitalists to move jobs overseas. And then the introduction of crack cocaine, first in the black and brown communities, and now into rural America. Just as they used against the Chinese in the Opium Wars, now the group of monopoly capitalists is using this against, just as the colonialists used the Opium Wars against the Chinese, they're using against the poor black and brown populations of the United States. And we need to be ever vigilant and see through their drama and have a real concrete material analysis, understand what imperialism is, understand that financial capital and the banks are the main enemy. And the main party they are attached to is the Democratic Party. The Democrats will never be a vehicle for progressive change. And we need to start calling out their sheepdogs now. Cori Bush is an enemy of the people. Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez is an enemy of the people. Bernie Sanders is an enemy of the people. They talk like they're in favor of health care. They talk maybe like they oppose these wars, but they don't. They continue to get nothing done and continue to back, and they tell you to continue to back the most exploitative, oppressive, powerful, dangerous, and effective political leaders like Biden. Biden is a racist, genocidal pawn of the imperialists. There is still kids and children in cages on the border in worsening situation. There's still makeshift refugee camps on the border. Which is the continual genocide of indigenous people. They will do anything to keep poor black and brown people here and abroad in a state of dependence, keep their rulers controlled, keep their leadership controlled, deny them legitimate leadership, just like they deny the left. The left movement has been destroyed, and the so-called leadership of the left has been replaced with the synthetic left by CIA backed forces. It's all documented. You look into Caleb Maupin's concept of the synthetic left. And where is the positive inspiration coming for humanity to escape the dying and decaying system, which is monopoly capitalism? It is coming from the global south and the anti-imperialist bloc. And in the recent years, this is coming into power by exactly what Glenn Ford said, by a multiracial mass movement against the banks. That's what we need here in the United States. And in the oppressed countries, it has been a mass anti-neoliberal coalitions that have come to power, that have raised the conditions of the people. I'm talking about the Morales government, which was before the coup, the attempted coup, was the fastest growing GDP in all South America, with socialist planning and help from Chinese loans. Venezuela, I believe it's 1999 or 2000 when Hugo Chavez came to power. It came from an anti-neoliberal, anti-imperialist, anti-monopoly capitalist mass coalition that put them in the power and is improving the conditions of the people. And then we have the communist revolutions that have continued, but have reformed in the face of brutal imperialist oppression. I'm talking about the Vietnamese communist. I'm talking about the Chinese communist. And then you have forces like Iran that had a popular revolution and continues to maintain stability and improve the conditions of the people under horrible sanctions and attacks. And you have the people of Syria with their leadership of Assad, who is forcing off and stopping the US-backed terrorists that control one-third of their country. They're trying to destroy them because Assad and the people organized a planned economy, a command economy that was able to lift the people out of poverty. And everywhere, all over the world, they come up and they demonize anybody I support the revolution that feeds the babies. And any revolution all over the world that does this is demonized. It's called democrat. It's called authoritarian. There will never be a revolution that wins. There will never be a socialist system, a command system, an anti-imperialist government that the U.S. will back, no matter how democratic they are. If you look at Venezuela, had a popular rewriting of the Constitution. Morales. These systems are far more democratic than the United States. They're still painted as authoritarian and anti-democratic because they don't allow the U.S. companies to run all over them. People want to get in the comments, share this out, be good. So we need to keep ever vigilant and understand that we need to call out the sheepdogs starting today. Cori Bush is a sheepdog. She will not represent the people. She is tied in the Democratic Party. Alexandria Cortez, Nina Turner. And I would say organizations that backed Biden, and even some of the more revolutionary figures in academia. Even forces like Cornel West fell for the controlled opposition of Trump and backed Biden against the interests of the people. Trump did not represent a greater danger than Biden. Biden is the more effective evil. Biden is more dangerous and more powerful than Trump ever thought of being. The ruling elites and financial elites were very easily kept Trump in his place and used him to continue to carry out the imperialist wars, even though he said he was against them. And now the Brzezinski faction is back into power in the United States, and they're carrying out very effective groundwork for just under the Carter administration. They're carrying out the groundwork necessary for further conflicts that will continue to destruction. of any competing force to the monopoly capitalist based in the West and led by the United States. Be ever vigilant. Do not support any Democrat ever until the material conditions change. I'm a scientific socialist. I'm not a dogmatist. But in the current material conditions where finance capital runs the world and their main party is the Democratic Party, the Democratic Party will never represent the people. It is oppressed nations throughout the world that are leading the way forward. We need to stand in solidarity with them and build a mass multiracial movement in the United States. As Glen, everybody hates the banks. It is in all the material interest of all working people and oppressed people in the United States to stand against the banks, because of the banks who use the government to maintain class and national oppression. Build power of poor black and brown people. Build grassroots militant power. Do not attempt to work within the Democratic Party. You must work outside the Democratic Party. There is no hope in the Democratic Party in the current conditions. On the 31st, this Saturday, I'm going to be talking with Karina Cree Paez of Telly Jaguar. And she wrote a very good essay, if you go on the Telly Jaguar site, saying four reasons why the Democratic Party will never be the vehicle for progressive change. And in that article, she lays out decades of progressive movements that went to the Democratic Party to die as the conditions of the people continued to worsen. Do not fall for it. Do not fall for it anymore. Do not support the sheepdogs. Do not support the sheepdogs. Call out the sheepdogs now. Nina Turner is a sheepdog imperialist enemy of the people. Cori Bush is a sheepdog imperialist enemy of the people. We need grassroots mass organizations that are for long term, as Huey Newton stated. The task of the party is to show the people through practice, through words and practice, the tactics for long-term resistance. This is what we need. I'm not hopeless. I have hope in the people, but there is no hope in the Democratic Party. There is no hope in the tools of the oppressor in the current system. An oppressed country like in Mexico, that is an oppressed nation. I support AMLO, who is a social democrat, who came to power on a coalition of both bourgeois nationalist forces and working and oppressed people. And AMLO is implementing things that are raising the conditions of the Mexican people. And AMLO has an anti-imperialist trend within his camp. And AMLO offered asylum to Morales when the U.S. imperialists tried to have a coup against them. And AMLO recently sent aid to Cuba against the embargo and the wishes of the imperialists in the United States. I'll support a social democrat in an oppressed country, but I will not support a social democrat in the belly of the beast when all of the social democrats in the United States are not allowed anywhere near the reins of power unless they serve those who are in power, which are the financial capitalists, which are the monopoly capitalists. We need our own tools. Their tools are not going to work for our needs. The Democratic Party is a tool of the oppressor that will not work for our needs. Do not try to use the tools of the oppressor to get your needs. We need to make our own organizations. We need grassroots, militant, long-term, prolonged, struggled organizations that have an ideology. As Comrade Joe Villarreal of Aslan Press says, ideology is key for Aslan to be free. And I think this is a universal statement in the United States for all working class oppressed people. We need ideology. It does not allow us to fall for their games and their tricks over and over and over again. If you ground yourself in the reality of class oppression and national oppression and the institutions that maintain them, and you analyze and look at this from an independent viewpoint, you don't allow yourself to be folly to their games and their tricks. And then you form organizations that hold that ideology and spread that ideology and spread that information directly to the people. Shout out to Comrade Ramiro Sebastian Funes, who is doing exactly what I'm trying to do here on Anti-Imperialist America. Please check out his show, Unmasking Imperialism. In his show, Unmasking Imperialism, every week or even more than once a week, he goes through and he points out the lies of the latest deception they're trying to do to split us and get us to support politicians who are not in our interest, and support coups against people who are our allies in the fight against our common enemy, the monopoly capitalist. So we need grassroots, long-term organizations of, for, and by the people that have an ideology and an understanding of class struggle and able to look through the lies of the imperialists and support people within our community to fight against them and stand in solidarity with our allies across the world. Stand in solidarity with the people of Venezuela. Stand in solidarity with the people of Bolivia. Stand in solidarity with the people of China, and even anti-imperialist countries, which are not yet socialist, like Russia, which has no other force but through survival to stand with the anti-imperialist bloc. Basic scientific socialism. First, there is a thesis, and then contradictions within that thesis create an antithesis. And then that antithesis struggles with the thesis and creates a new system, a synthesis, which becomes the thesis. And then the process starts over again. What is the current thesis? Imperialism. What are the contradictions within imperialism? National and class oppression. And what is the result of these contradictions? Anti-imperialist and socialist countries who have no other choice but for their survival to adapt socialism, to create planned economies, to be able to survive against the old system, the old decaying system of imperialism based in the West. And all of the drama and the hype and the news and the lies is all of maintaining that structure. It's clear. It's easy to understand. That is the concept. That is what is going on. There's two forces in this world right now: the anti-imperialist and the imperialist. The imperialists want to maintain the control of the finance capitalists based in London and Wall Street. And they want to keep the majority of the world poor. They want to impoverish the global South and oppressed nations to keep those economies producing goods that they control, that increase their wealth and keep those countries poor and dependent and stop those countries from developing. And then they want to use the global South to beat over the head of the workers in the first world. Say, at least you got it better than them, just like they did in the South. Or say, at least you got it better than the slave. At least and the way they use racism to maintain class oppression. The imperialist hegemony, which is holding back development. And it's not even the real crime of the monopoly capitalists and imperialists is not only the current exploitation they do now of ripping off our labor, but the real crime monopoly capitalists are committing is they're taking away our future. If we work in cooperation with each other, if we organize things rationally and plan, we can build and unleash better technology and form better societies and improve people's conditions. And then improve people's conditions with higher education, which promotes more innovation in the socialist system. and produce better wealth and a better standard of living. And it's a positive, upgoing circle that's being held back by the monopoly capitalists and the imperialists. They're holding back. And a lot of people, maybe I'll get in a little bit, I'll talk about, third worldism. Third worldism, the idea that there is no revolutionary potential of workers in the oppressor countries because they have labor aristocracies who will not support revolution. But I would argue there is some truth to this, but it's not entirely true. Yes, the revolutionary movement and energy is being led by the oppressed nations because they are in worse conditions and are being forced to adapt socialism. But as the system of imperialism is falling, the labor aristocracies are dwindling in the imperialist countries. And even if they have it better than our brothers and sisters in the global South, the fact that the imperialists are holding back socialism and socialist progress, that the majority of workers in the first world would have not worse material conditions if imperialism fell, but would have better material conditions because imperialism is holding back history. Imperialism is holding back a better future for workers in the first world and especially workers in the global South and oppressed countries. And we need to, when we're not gonna be able to use their institutions to be able to change this for ourselves. It's so manipulated and controlled in the United States that we need grassroots revolutionary of, for, and by the people organizations like the Brown Berets, Partido Raza Unida, the Black Panthers, places you can see the very positive elements that weren't manipulated within Occupy Wall Street or Black Lives Matter and the Black nationalist struggles in the United States. And then up and coming groups like I see images of hope and groups like Redneck Revolt or groups like the Young Patriots, which were part of the original Rainbow Coalition. And that goes back. That goes back to those fusion parties in North Carolina, which were populist poor whites uniting with recently freed slaves, were revolutionary black Republicans. Like this is the only way forward. And I think as conditions worsen, just as Glenn Ford said at the beginning of this, that in capitalism, imperialism is on its way out. It's dead and it's dying, but we got to make sure it doesn't take it. We've got to make sure that it doesn't take us with it. And if we don't want it to take us with it, then we have to build the shadow governments. We have to build these mass organizations, these mass revolution organizations. In the Soviet Union, when the first socialist revolution, how they came to power was interesting. There was a attack against the bourgeois government, and the bourgeois didn't really have the ability to fight off that attack. So the proletarians organized the Soviets to fight off the attack. And then after that attack, they were more powerful than the bourgeoisie, and they were able to take power. So as this weakening, I always it's my revolutionary theory of pick me up on your way down. We have to develop the building blocks of the new society. We have to do it underneath the falling empire. And I see little glimpses of it. I mean, it's not fully hashed out. Like I don't have a perfect plan for it. But that's the only way forward, because we have proven time and time again that there is no hope within the Democratic Imperialist Party. It's the only way forward. They say opportunism is somebody who tells you that things are easier to solve than they actually are. And there is the Democratic Party, and anyone who backs the Democratic Party is the definition of opportunism. We have to do the long-term mass organization, uphill battle, and struggle to eventually take power. And we can do it in a number of ways. We can do third-party candidates. We can do revolutionary think tanks. We can do our own media, promote an ideology, media organization. We can organize along a host of issues of democratic power for oppressed nation. We can organize along class lines. We can organize along in oppressed communities. And then we can build the coalition that will eventually take power. I think that's going to do it for tonight. I'm starting to lose my voice. As always, comrades, all power to the people.